Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the Uncanny X-Men, I kind of want to sit down and cover Uncanny X-Men issue number 353 and 354. And the reason why, because this kind of gives us the idea of post-trial of Gambit, but also what you had Marvel try to do when it came to the character of Rogue, but also the same thing for the character of Gambit as well, possibly leading into his own solo series once again. But getting into the opening pages of Uncanny X-Men issue number 353, we really do pick go at Rogue having this nightmare. Now you can kind of tell it's a nightmare how the way this opening pages go for this part of the storyline, but it's also the idea of us seeing Rogue attacking Wolverine in a way where like she wanted to take his powers away. She wanted to get inside his mind and kind of learn his past. But also like she had another plan for the idea of Wolverine's powers in his past. Because in the opening pages, at first, she's kind of giving herself a quick rundown like, does she really want to do what she's going to do? But then out of nowhere, she begins to absorb the powers in the memories of Wolverine. And this kind of leads into a small battle between the two characters. Now, it's also the idea for me personally that Marvel had plans to kind of reveal the idea of the son of Wolverine. And the reason why I'm saying that because in this nightmare that Rogue is having, she basically says that when she went into his mind, she had discovered that he had a son out there that he never told anyone about. But either way, the battle does kind of end with Wolverine killing Golf Rogue. Now, again, this is a nightmare, a dream. And so, of course, she does wake up freaking out. But once you do have Rogue wake up, she's then confronted by Storm. Now, for me personally, this is kind of like, okay, Storm being the big sister for Rogue, which honestly, it always felt like that, with Storm being in Rogue's corner. And the reason why I'm saying that, because you have some folks out there who say, like, oh, Rogue and also like Wolverine are like the adoptive parents to Rogue. And for me personally, that's not the case at all. For me, Storm and Wolverine are kind of like the big siblings to Rogue. Either way, for Storm, the reason why she's here now because she heard Rogue scream in her sleep, but also the idea that Rogue had overslept. Now, for Storm being there, it's also her being in Rogue's corner, being like, hey, what's going on with you? This is why I say it's like post-trial of Gambit. Because for Rogue, when her powers were shut down in the trial of the Gambit storyline, it allowed her the ability to actually get close to Gambit, build a bond with Gambit. And with that bond right there, are being strong with the idea that both characters had feelings for one another, they got even closer than they were earlier in their love life. Now, on top of that, for Rogue, for many years, she was not really able to touch other people. And so getting that chance to touch Gambit, the man she truly loves, it kind of gave her this rebirth where she was then able to, build a close bond with him. But it's also the idea she's wondering why in the world is she having these dreams for? Now, for Storm, she does remind us that when it comes to Rogue, when she does touch other people, she does absorb their powers and yes, their memories as well, but also their psyches as well too. So for example, there was a storyline for Rogue where the persona of Captain Marvel kind of took over the body of Rogue for a good moment there. It was like battling for the body of Rogue, Captain Marvel or Rogue herself. And so for Storm, she's kind of wondering, is part of Gambit right now inside of her? If that's the case, maybe a part of him is the reason why she's having those dreams. Now, another couple we have to focus on is going to be, well, Archangel and also Psylocke. Now, for me personally, for these two characters, they were another power couple for the X-Men. The only thing is that by the end of the 1990s or really early 2000s, they kind of fell apart for a lot of different reasons. But you also had Marvel try their best over the years to kind of bring these two characters back together. But either way, when it comes to Psylocke, she's going through the whole idea of the Crimson Dawn. And for Archangel, it's him trying to help out Psylocke the best he can. And that right there is the problem, because for Psylocke, being connected to the Crimson Dawn is kind of changing her mind on how she looks at life. Because for Psylocke, it's the idea that she does not look at life as a complex thing like most people do, with the idea of so many choices that go on their days throughout their lives. But for Psylocke, it's her saying like life is easy once you kind of remove all these different complex things and just make the right choices. But also the fact that like once you make that choice, ride that choice. Don't try to go back and forth between different choices when it comes to your life. And the reason why she's saying that, because for Archangel, is him right now kind of deciding what to do. Like, should he be a full-on X-Men or kind of be away from the X-Men to be able to spend time with her, but also kind of help her deal with the idea of the Crimson Dawn. But for Archangel, he kind of hates the idea of what Psylocke is saying, because for Psylocke, it's her saying like, dude, just choose something and just move on. But also the idea that you had Psylocke jump off a building. And the reason why, because she wanted to show him like, look, you knew what to do just like that when it came to saving my life. You didn't sit there and wonder like if you should or not, you just did it. So when it comes to your other choices, why not do the same thing as well? Now, for the X-Men, they're right now trying to have a relaxing day because for their roster, it has gone through a lot in a very short period of time when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. You have Cyclops and Jean Grey who had officially left the X-Men, and we'll kind of explain that here in a moment. But you have Charles Xavier who got arrested for the whole idea of the Onslaught event. You have Gambit gone because of what he did, the Mutant Massacre. Archangel and Psylocke are also away as well. Like, there are a lot of different pieces missing from the X-Men, but you also had the X-Men bring in 3 new characters, Dr. Reyes, Maggot, and also Marrow. Now, while you do have the X-Men getting ready for a fun day outside, you didn't have Logan realize that they have company. And that would be Margaret Stone. Now, for Margaret Stone, she's part of the Board of Education. Here's the thing, because for her being there, her main goal is to figure out what's going on here at the school that Charles claimed to be a school. Because for Charles, he was supposed to send reports every 2 years to the Board of Education. He has not done that. Now, we can say the reason why, because what the X-Men had gone through in the 1990s, all these different X-Men crossovers. But her main goal at the moment is to see if the school should be re-accredited at all. And so she has to walk around the school. And of course, with Logan, this is the worst time to actually do that. Now, there is another plot line we kind of have to talk about. It's kind of like plot line C. It's the idea of Bishop and Deathbird, because when it came to the X-Men, they were in space helping out the Shi'ar Empire. On their way back to Earth, their ship had crashed. Now, for most of the X-Men, they had made it back to Earth. Bishop did not. Out of nowhere, him and Deathbird were teleported away. Now, for Bishop, he was badly injured. And so for Deathbird, her main goal right now is to help him recover. But in that storyline that we had covered, for Bishop and also Deathbird, they got really close. And for Deathbird, she wants to keep him around to kind of help him rule over the Empire. Now, with all that being said, for Deathbird, she had told Bishop the rest of the X-Men had died. Now, for Bishop, he does not believe her, but at the same time, he can't do anything because she says that he's paralyzed, but she's right now trying to help him recover. Now, we do see Rogue go over to where Joseph is at. Now, for Joseph, he is technically Magneto, but right now at this time, we don't know if he truly is, because in an earlier storyline, we had talked about the idea of another Magneto, possibly the original Magneto, reappearing in the world of Marvel Comics. Now, with all that being said, for Joseph, he's currently staying with the X-Men at the moment. And for him and Rogue, they kind of got close there for a moment as well. But you do have Rogue go out of her way to confront him and ask him to touch him, to look into his mind. Now, for Rogue, she claims it's the way to help Joseph truly remember who he is, because for Joseph, he does not really remember anything from his past when it comes to him being Magneto. But for Joseph, he kind of realized that what Rogue is asking is not really to help him, but to really help her. And so he says no. Now for Rogue, she does walk away. And you have Logan and also Margaret walk into the room. Well, while they're doing that, something happens to Joseph where he just kneels over. And for Margaret, she's kind of like, what in the world is going on here at the school? But either way, you didn't have the X-Men just go ahead and go over to the pond to be able to, just relax. Now, things kind of go south very quickly because you do have Bobby Drake go out of his way to prank Logan. And for Logan, he hates the idea of, well, being pranked by Bobby Drake. And so you have Logan try to attack Bobby after being pranked by him. Now, for Storm, she does step in, and so does Marrow. And really, when it comes to Storm and Marrow, they judge Logan a lot, where it does tick him off and make him walk away. Now, we could technically say that all that happened because for Wolverine around his time in Marvel Comics, it was the whole idea that when Magneto had removed the adamantium off his bones, Charles Xavier had discovered that apparently the adamantium had started a process that was going on with Wolverine. And let me explain. So ever since Wolverine Mutant Psi had activated, he was supposed to go through some kind of process where he would turn into a wild beast. Not literally, but his mindset would be like that. The adamantium on his bones kind of stopped that process. And so once you have Magneto being able to remove the adamantium, that process had kind of continued. Now, for Elektra and also Stick, they were kind of able to teach Wolverine to not allow his wild side to take over. But again, we could say what that would happen right now for this moment, but it's not confirmed, but he does walk away. Now, after he does walk away, you didn't have the X-Men realize the original Blackbird that Forge made is underneath the pond. It's buried deep in the pond because, well, Forge was told to hide it somewhere while he was making a new one. But that now shifts us over to, well, good old Wolverine again. And for Wolverine, he's just resting by himself. But then out of nowhere, something or someone grabs him and absorbs his energy. Now he does scream out loud. And the rest of the X-Men, they run over to his location. When they arrive, we're kind of left to believe it had to be Rogue. Because when they do arrive, they find Rogue there. And of course, it's kind of like, Rogue, what did you do to Logan? Now, for her, she's saying she's innocent. And the reason why, because she arrived there only because she heard the screams of Wolverine. Now, for Storm, it's kind of like she trusts Rogue, but she has to be sure. But for Rogue, it's like, no, you don't trust me. And she runs away. Now, right after that, you didn't have the X-Men be confronted by Sauron. Now, for Sauron, again, this is a character we have not talked about in a good while when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. The whole origin of Carl Lycos is somewhat important for the overall story when it comes to the idea of Sauron. Now, for Carl Lycos, who is Sauron, Carl Lycos used to work alongside with Charles Xavier back in the day on a special project. The problem is that when it came to Marvel Comics, they had never truly explained what that project was all about. But anyways, for Carl Lycos, in that same storyline, we had learned that he was bitten by a mutated pterodactyl, where unfortunately, it turned into this vampire-like character where he has to absorb the life energy of other people. Here comes the big catch though, because when he does go out of his way to absorb the energy of a mutant, he does change into his Sauron form. Here's another catch though. When he does change form into Sauron, it's basically kind of like the Hulk, a whole brand new persona that is just completely evil though. And so right now for him to stay in that form, he has to go out of his way to absorb the energy of a mutant like he did when he came to, well, Wolverine. And so once he does, he also gains extra strength and speed as well. Now, for Sauron, he had technically left the Savage Land behind for a lot of different reasons. The one reason being Khazar, but also the idea of the Savage Land around his time in Marvel Comics being wiped out. Not yet, but like it was the idea of the possibility it could be wiped out. Anyways, when he arrived in New York, of course he needed someone to feed off of to survive. Now, at first, he did absorb the energy of a regular human, but then he found a mutant. Once he was able to absorb the energy of that random mutant, it kind of gave him the ability to take full-on control as Sauron again, or the other persona known as Carl Lycos. And so with the Sauron persona being in full control, you then had Sauron go out of his way to find the X-Men. He had picked up on their scent. And so that is why right now he's currently here trying to fight against our heroes at the moment. Now, for a brief moment, I do want to shift back over to Deathbird and also, well, Bishop, because for those two characters, like we saw earlier, they're still traveling through space at the moment, but it's also Bishop beginning to realize even more now that he's being played by Deathbird, about the idea of what happened to the X-Men, but also why she only saved him, but not the rest of the X-Men when they were attacked in the earlier storyline. Now, for Deathbird and Bishop, as they're traveling through space, out of nowhere, their spaceship begins to get attacked by another spaceship. And so for Deathbird and also Bishop, it does seem like their spaceship is about to crash onto a random planet. Now, as we do shift back over to Rogue, we see Rogue go back over to Joseph, where she finds him completely knocked out, needing CPR. Now, for Rogue, she does go out of her way to give him CPR, but then Marrow appeared to remind us that Marrow is technically part of the X-Men at this point. But anyways, when it comes to Marrow, she does see what Rogue is doing at the moment, which is right now trying to give CPR to Joseph. But for Rogue, she begins to freak out and think that Marrow thinks that she's right now trying to do something to Magneto, Joseph. Now, for Marrow, she clarifies saying, no, I saw you trying to do right there. It's all good. Now, once you have Joseph get back up, Rogue just dips out. And accordingly was wondering, where is she going to? Now, I kind of want to go ahead and shift back over to the battle between the X-Men and also Sauron, because for me personally, it does get a tad bit funny. I don't know why. It's the whole idea of him just being able to pull out a gun to surprise our heroes, because our heroes are all like, we got all these different powers. You know, you really can't stop us. We got you on the edge. He's all like, oh, do you now? I got a gun. Bam, bam. And like shoot Storm. And I'm like, wait, hold up. Why in the world does this man just have a random gun to use in this battle? But either way, as the pages go on, we do see the X-Men officially lose the battle. Really, you have Jubilee in the last one try to make a stand against him, but unfortunately, she also falls to him as well. Now, I do want to take a quick pause on the battle between the X-Men and also Sauron. And the reason why, because I want to shift over to Cyclops and Jean Grey. Because, like I said earlier, for those two characters, they had officially left the X-Men, right? They had moved away from the X-Men to allow Cyclops to recover. And the reason why, because back in Operation Zero Tolerance, we had learned that Bastion had put a bomb inside the body of Cyclops, where, of course, he had to recover thanks to Dr. Reyes being able to remove the bomb from his body. And so while you do have the two characters at the moment away from the X-Men in Alaska, well, you have Cyclops being very upset about the idea that he's no longer able to control his powers like he used to in the past when it came to like just pinpointing his blast at different targets. And the reason why he can't do that anymore is because the pain he's currently feeling at the moment. Now, with all that being said, you didn't have Jean Grey walk out the room. When she does, we see Jean Grey wearing the Phoenix outfit. And for Cyclops, he's wondering what in the world is going on here. But this kind of leads us into the ending of this storyline. The reason why, because we do go at Wolverine being able to regain enough strength to fight against Sauron. Now, as the battle goes on, you then have Jubilee being able to come in at the very last second to help out Logan to fight against him, where of course you do have the two characters being able to take him down. Now, after doing that, you then have the X-Men say, okay, what do we do with him? Now, for Logan, he's kind of like, listen, we'll call in S.H.I.E.L.D. to take him away. But his main goal right now is to figure out what's going on with Rogue. Because we do learn earlier on that when it came to Sauron draining the energy of Wolverine, well, technically, Right after that, you then had Rogue appear, and she also absorbed a tad bit of powers as well of Wolverine, and then just dipped out. And so for Logan, he wants to know what's going on with her. But for Rogue, she had officially left and started traveling over to Manhattan. This is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.